It was just another night on the job for Officer Darren Cole, a man who had spent years patrolling the streets with a badge and a deep sense of superiority. He wasn't the kind of cop who asked questions first. He believed in authority, in control, in making sure everyone knew who was in charge, and tonight was no different. At a dimly lit gas station on the edge of town, a woman stood near her car, her back turned as she pumped fuel. She looked calm, confident, but to Officer Cole, none of that mattered. He saw only one thing: her skin color. Without hesitation, he walked up, his presence heavy with intimidation. "You don't belong here," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for her to hear. Before she could respond, he flicked the cigarette in his hand and pressed it against her arm. The sharp sizzle of burning skin cut through the night air. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She simply turned around, locked eyes with him, and spoke 5 words that drained the blood from his face. "I'm your new police chief." And in that moment, everything changed. Officer Darren Cole's breath caught in his throat. His fingers twitched, the cigarette slipping from his grasp and landing on the pavement between them. The woman didn't move, didn't break eye contact. There was something about the way she looked at him, calm, steady, like she already knew exactly who he was. His mind raced. This had to be a joke, a setup. But then he noticed the way the gas station clerk, who had been watching from inside, suddenly straightened. The way the few bystanders nearby fell silent. They recognized her. They knew. Chief Olivia Carter. The name hit him like a cold wave. He had heard it earlier that week in the station briefing. The department's new leader. The first black woman to take the position. He hadn't cared enough to pay attention then, but he sure as hell was paying attention now. Her uniform wasn't on, but her authority was unmistakable, and that was the problem, because now everything he had done in those last few seconds, the words, the cigarette, the look in his eyes, was going to come back at him. Hard. And yet, she still hadn't said anything more. She was waiting, letting the moment stretch, making him feel every second of it. The silence between them stretched longer than Darren Cole could stand. His pulse pounded in his ears. He wanted to say something, anything, to take control of the situation. But what could he say? An apology wouldn't be enough, and an excuse would only make things worse. His mouth felt dry. His hands, always so steady, clenched into fists at his sides. Chief Olivia Carter finally spoke, her voice even measured. Badge number. 2 words. No anger, no raised voice, just an order. And it was in that moment Cole realized he wasn't the one in control anymore. His badge felt heavier than ever as he hesitated. His entire career, he had gotten away with things just like this. A look, a threat, an action that no one questioned. But now the woman in front of him wasn't just another person on the street. She had power. And worse, she had witnesses. From inside the gas station, the clerk had his phone up, recording. A couple near the pumps whispered to each other, stealing glances. The weight of their stares made Cole's skin prickle. This wasn't just a bad night. This was the kind of mistake that ended careers. But then something unexpected happened. Chief Carter didn't demand his badge right away. She studied him, waiting, as if she wanted to see what he would do next. That was almost worse than if she had just arrested him on the spot. It left him with a choice. And for the first time in a long time, Darren Cole wasn't sure what to do. The air felt thick, pressing down on Officer Cole like a weight he couldn't shake. His mind scrambled for a way out, but every second that passed made it harder. Chief Carter's stare never wavered. She wasn't just looking at him. She was studying him, measuring every breath, every twitch of his fingers. His instincts told him to do what he always did, push back, assert control. But there was no way to spin this, no excuse that would erase what had just happened. The clerk inside was still recording, the couple by the pumps whispering, their eyes darting between him and Carter. The situation wasn't just bad, it was spiraling. Cole forced himself to stand tall, his jaw tightening. "Look, Chief," he started, his voice low, careful. "This was a misunderstanding." Chief Carter didn't blink. Was it? He swallowed. He could feel his own authority slipping, and it terrified him. But before he could say another word, the distant wail of sirens cut through the night. Another patrol car, speeding toward them, red and blue lights flashing against the dark pavement. Cole's stomach dropped. Someone had called it in. Maybe the clerk, maybe a bystander. It didn't matter. His own department was on the way, and once they arrived, there'd be no talking his way out of this. Carter tilted her head slightly, listening to the sirens growing louder. "You still haven't given me your badge number." Her voice was calm, steady. But there was something else beneath it, a quiet, unshakable authority that told him this wasn't going away. Cole's fingers twitched toward his badge, but he hesitated, because once he handed it over, everything would change. And for the first time in his career, he wasn't sure if the system he'd always counted on would protect him. The squad car skidded to a stop. The doors flew open, and in that moment, Cole realized this was bigger than just him. The squad car doors slammed shut, and two officers stepped out. Cole recognized them immediately, his own colleagues. For a brief second, a flicker of hope sparked in his chest. Maybe they'd back him up. Maybe they'd take one look at Chief Carter in plain clothes and assume she was just some random citizen causing trouble. But that flicker died the moment Officer Ramirez locked eyes with Carter. His expression shifted, confusion, then shock, then something close to fear. He knew who she was, and that meant the usual playbook wasn't going to work. "Chief." Ramirez's voice wavered slightly. He looked at Cole, then back at Carter, like he was trying to piece together a situation that already felt like a disaster. Carter didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Cole. "Your officer assaulted me," she said, her voice even but sharp. "And now I want his badge." Cole's pulse pounded in his ears. You could feel Ramirez and the other officer shifting uncomfortably beside him. They had to be wondering the same thing he was. What happens now? Then, another voice cut through the tense silence. A deep, commanding voice that made even Carter turn her head slightly. "I don't think that's necessary." A third patrol car had arrived, but this one was different. The man who stepped out wasn't just another officer. He was Captain Harris, their superior, the one person with enough pull to take control of the situation before it spiraled completely out of control. Cole exhaled slowly. If anyone could save him, it was Harris. But when he saw the way Carter's expression hardened at the sight of the captain, he realized something else. This wasn't just about tonight. There was history here. Something deeper. Something he didn't understand. And in that moment he knew his fate was no longer in his hands. The air felt heavier as Captain Harris stepped forward, his gaze shifting between Cole and Chief Carter. His expression was unreadable, but the way he carried himself made it clear. He was here to take control. Cole almost felt relief, believing for a second that Harris would smooth this over, make it disappear like other problems in the past. But then Harris turned fully to Carter and spoke in a low, measured tone. "I was expecting to meet you under different circumstances, Chief." Carter crossed her arms. "So was I." Cole's stomach twisted. There was something in their exchange, something unspoken but thick with meaning. Whatever history existed between them, it was clear Harris wasn't surprised by any of this. In fact, he looked prepared. Ramirez shifted uncomfortably. "Captain, maybe we should." "Enough," Harris cut in, his voice sharp. "Cole, hand over your badge." Cole's mouth went dry. "Captain, you don't have to do this." He glanced around, searching for support, but no one stepped in. Even Ramirez looked away. Carter didn't say a word, just waited. Cole hesitated, his fingers hovering over his badge. For years, he had walked these streets with absolute certainty that no one could touch him, that the system would always back him up. But now, standing before the new police chief and a captain who wasn't even trying to cover for him, he realized his protection was gone. Slowly, he unpinned the badge from his chest, the weight of it heavier than ever. He placed it in Harris' outstretched hand, but just as he did, Carter spoke again. "This isn't just about tonight," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "There's a file on you, Cole. Complaints that were buried, reports that disappeared. That stops now." His breath hitched. This wasn't just a punishment. This was an investigation. His past, everything he thought he had hidden, was about to come to light. And then Carter stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You thought I was just another face in the crowd," she said, "but you never stopped to ask who I was." Cole had no words, no defense. The sound of the squad car door opening behind him made his stomach twist even tighter. And for the first time in his life, he knew exactly what it felt like to be on the other side. Cole stood frozen, the weight of reality crushing down on him. The badge that had once given him power was now out of his hands, and the system he had relied on was no longer shielding him. The flashing lights of the patrol cars cast sharp shadows across his face, but the real darkness was settling in his chest. This was the moment he had never seen coming. Captain Harris gave a small nod to the two officers standing behind Cole. Ramirez hesitated for a moment, but then stepped forward, reaching for Cole's wrists. "Turn around," he said, his voice tight, almost reluctant. Cole didn't argue. He didn't fight. There was no point. As the cold steel of the cuffs locked around his wrists, he glanced up at Chief Carter one last time. She still hadn't looked away. "You did this," he muttered, but there was no anger in his voice, just quiet disbelief. Carter tilted her head slightly. "No," she said, "you did." As he was led toward the patrol car, the gas station clerk kept recording, capturing a moment that would soon be everywhere. But Carter didn't watch him go. She turned to Harris, her expression unreadable. "This is just the beginning." And as the door shut behind Cole, he finally understood she meant it.